Welcome back. So the Aileron cable project continues. What I've done now here is got the sleeve there for left hand side of the aircraft and got that in place up in the front. And as you can see, I've got it running up through the keel. And if you sort of follow the center of the screen there, runs up, curves around there, or radiuses around there behind that back bulkhead. And then sort of horizontal across the top, over the top of those pulleys, which the top one's not going to be used anymore, the lower one's still going to get used for this system. And then it pops out here in the wing, and you can see I put a bit of tape around where I'm going to trim it there, and that's where it's going to go into that adjuster that I put in there a little while back. So I'm just going to basically pull that out now and trim that off with a grinder with the cutting wheel on there. So that's what I'm doing here. Just do it, nice and clean, so get a nice clean finish. And after I cleaned it, I also, just smoothed out the inside of the cable sleeve with a file and cleaned it out. Make sure there was no dust and stuff in there. So there, it's in place now and ready to do the other side. As you can see there, it's just slid into the cable adjuster. So here I've started threading the sleeve in there through the right wing, or straight part there, in through the conduit. And once it gets to the end there, I can grab it there and pulling it through into the cabin area, and then feed it through down through the keel. I've got to get it over the little braces in the keel and just make sure it doesn't get sort of tangled up in any of the other things running down the keel there. But now that we don't have any moving cables running down there, it's not really an issue to worry about anything touching anything through there anymore. So there, it's pulled through, and what I need to do now is get it fitted to the bracket there, as you can see, and then trim the end out there on the wing like I did the other one. So just doing the same thing here. Now this cable sleeve is just like a coiled metal. It doesn't have like a Teflon insert or anything, and this was the only one that I was able to get in this dimension for the 1/8 inch cable. I couldn't actually find one that had the Teflon insert. Anyway, so now I've started running the actual cable itself, and I've taken it from the cabin there where I have the reel of it, and I'm putting that little cable terminal on there. That's the first one that goes and locks into that bell crank there that goes out to the Aileron push rod. So sort of threaded that on because I need that on first, and then once that's on, the next thing to do is feed it back into that cable that I just put into the cable sleeve. So that's what I've just started to do here, just basically pushing it back in there, and it'll end up coming out up in the nose section there where the wheel is there that connects to the actual aileron controls in the cabin, or to the side sticks. So here I've just got the cable out, and as you can see, just threaded through, and it doesn't take any effort at all to push this cable through. So it's good that even though there's no Teflon sleeve in there, it seems to be running smoothly in there. And I'm only going to have minimal radiuses in there because I don't want it to sort of bind up at all. So I'm just keeping my radiuses nice and large. And what I'm doing here is just wiping down the cable, so if there was any dust or whatever picked up, I'm wiping that down as I'm pulling it through the sleeve there, because it potentially could have been some dust in the sleeve or whatever. Just wanted to make sure it's sort of clean. But the way this cable sleeve works is actually plenty of room in there to catch any dust, as you'll see in a little bit when I show it to you in detail. And so now I'm feeding it through the first of the brackets there, the cable adjusters there. That's the one that lives on the right hand side of the aircraft. And then I'll put another one of those cable terminals on, and that's the one that engages there the front wheel that hooks up to the controls. And then finally through the next bracket, and then finally back in the other cable. So 3 different things that had to go on there before it went back into the other cable. And just feeding it back through there. And the goal was now just to sort of dry fit everything and test it and just make sure that everything was operating smoothly before I go and clamp anything into place like those little cable terminals, because they have to be swaged on there with a swaging tool. And there you can see there's the setup there. Obviously I've just put it together like that so it's easy enough to feed the cable through, and just fed that all along, and as you can see still sort of wiping the cable off there, and just fed it back so it pops out inside the other wing, which there it is there. And then finally that gets threaded back to inside of the cabin. It goes back through the one pulley there, that lower pulley that's right on the edge of the bulkhead inside the cabin. So there you can see it comes out of there, basically loops around the bell crank there, and then goes back. And you see I'm putting that little cable terminal on there as well. That's the one that's for that bell crank before I feed that back. And obviously I'm not crimping anything on there, just because I can't crimp those on until I know exactly where everything needs to be, and I mark those as you'll see coming up, and so they're in the right place. And there you can see now I've got the cable running back down that little opening there behind the tank in the strake there, and then that feeds back through this one pulley, as you can see there, and then ultimately joins up with the starting point that I started out with. So here's that end, and so just to make sure it doesn't fray or whatever, I'm just putting a bit of heat shrink on there, just to help it from getting frayed or stabbing somebody or whatever, because that stuff can be pretty sharp, especially if it's frayed. So doing that, and then the next thing to do is put a cable eye on there. So this goes through this little opening that's in that little bulk. There's a bulkhead behind there which just sort of reinforces that back wall. But anyway, so I've got my little sleeve on there now, and with a little eyelet that goes in there, and then that gets pushed together tightly, and then with the swaging tool I crimp that little sleeve on there, which holds everything nice and tight so that doesn't come apart. And I just ended up buying the swaging tool from Home Depot, which is the same one. Jeff had one that we used to use before, so I didn't have one. So anyway, I picked that up a while ago, and just swaging it in 3 places. So starting in the center, give it a crimp there, and then move over to the left and a crimp, and then move over to the right and give it a crimp. And so ultimately that goes back through one side of a turnbuckle, and then the other end of the cable coming from the other side will be the same thing. So it makes this cable makes a continuous loop through both of those cable sleeves, and then out round the bell cranks at either end of the wings there, or the strakes, and then comes back through those pulleys, just the 2 pulleys on the back bulkhead, which are in compression, so I'm not worried about them flexing because they're in compression. And then ultimately they join together there with the turnbuckle, as I said. So here you can see I've just got it mocked into place, just using a clamp, because I didn't want to cut that cable or swage it yet. I just want to test everything and just make sure this whole system's going to work, because again it's just unproven at this point. So I've got it clamped there so it won't slide, and you can see if you look there, I've got it around the pulleys there, and I've put everything sort of just mocked together. I haven't swaged anything on there, so those cables can still slide in there because those little cable terminals haven't been crimped, and even with the one up the front here. But I just wanted to get everything there, snug the cable up, and I tightened the the turnbuckle just enough to take the tension on the cable, so I was able to do a bit of a test in there. And as you can see, there's the one in the left hand wing, that's all done as well. So everything's looking good. So here's the moment of truth now. Is it gonna is it gonna feel good, or is it gonna bind up or whatever because of the cable sleeve? And after sleeping on that, I thought about this a little more, and I was like, I really need to take out every little bit of curve that I can out of this cable sleeve, so there's least amount of friction. So what you can see there now, I've kind of straightened it out behind this bulkhead there. It comes out of the keel and just angles immediately over and up to where it goes through the conduit, and same on this side. And so I've basically taken sort of 2 right, or at least 1 good right angle out of there, which is going to buy me some things. So I've got I've got only one real 90 degree turn there, and that's up front. So this is looking at what the cable sleeve looks like, and you see it's a round cable or round steel thing in there, so it's got room to gather any dust in that, but as opposed to a flat one. And because of that, I wanted to lubricate the cable as much as I could, because it doesn't have the silicone sleeve. So I'm actually using this graphite in there, and hopefully that'll help smooth out the motion as well. So I've just put a bunch of that in there as I was feeding everything in, or before I was feeding it in. So you see I've got everything sort of mocked together now after shortening those sleeves, which meant that I had to basically rerun the cable as well. You know me, I love doing everything 2 times and usually 3 times. So here now, if I move the stick now, and even though I don't have anything swaged on there, you'll see what happens. So there's the bell crank there, and you can see it's off to the right at the bottom there. And again, this is with nothing swage, and I've just got just enough tension on there, maybe only about 20 pounds on there right now on the cable. And if I move it all the way to the other way there and go back and have a look, you'll see it's moved to the center, and that's basically full through the full motion there. So even though nothing's swaged on there yet, it's actually working, and working fairly smoothly, so I'm pretty happy about that. So I was concerned that the cable might bind up in there once you put some tension on it, but it seems to be working okay. And so what I've done now here is I've just marked with the yellow tape where the cable is going across the top there, and then I disassembled that, and then I was able to figure out exactly where that needed to be swaged, the little cable terminal. So I swaged that one on there now, and the next thing to do is to try it again. And you see I've swaged that end over there on there, and I've also gone and swaged on the ends here and reassembled these. So everything's basically put together as it would be right now, but I haven't like riveted on those cable terminal brackets or anything like that, so I can still disassemble everything except for the swaging. But as you can see, I've got it all together, and the test now is to see how it works moving the ailerons. So I just hooked up one of the ailerons there just to see how it was going to work, and moving it through the motions there. If you have a look at the aileron, you'll see it is moving up and down, and there's very little friction in the system, so it's feeling pretty good. So I was happy about that. So at least the cable sleeve seems to be working okay without too much friction. And there you can see when I move it back and forth, you can see that turnbuckle's moving. And as you can see, I've got the cable tensioner gauge on there, and that's just moving with it. And what the next thing I did was, this is the ultimate test really, is I've clamped the aileron in place and wanted to see how much play there is in the side stick itself. And as you'll see, it ends up being quite a lot of play in there, so I haven't actually fixed this problem yet. And what it ends up happening is, now I'm just pushing gently there, but now when I push all the way, you'll see that cable tensioner, it goes tight, and then come back the other way, it goes really loose. So what's happening is the cable is stretching, and unfortunately, I made the mistake. I bought that cheapy cable, and I guess it isn't pre-stretched or whatever. So needless to say, I've gone and ordered the pre-stretched cable from Spruce. It'll be here tomorrow now that it's back in stock. So I'm going to have to do the whole thing again now, at least the internal cable bit. But that'll be in the next video, and hopefully that solves the problem. Anyway, thanks for watching, and tune in again on Saturday.